Everyone, welcome to the stream. I am not so used to this still, so please bear with me whilst I try and work out some of the technical sides of streaming. I'm just going to change a couple of things. I think I'm supposed to change the actual title of the stream, which I think I can edit, so just bear with me. We're not playing chess, we're analyzing chess. I'm sure there's a way to change this before you go live, but I'm a dinosaur, so forgive me. Analyzing last night's OTB game. Maybe, yeah, OTB game. And now, the moment of truth. Supposedly, if I write leechess.org in the title, all of my followers on Leechess will be informed that I am now streaming, so that's terrifying. All three of them. Hi, Mum. Alright, done. So, now streaming my game. So I've not done this before, so I wanted to start before we actually discuss. Also, if there's anybody that's watching that could just write in the chat if they can hear me, that'd be great. I know there were some volume issues last time. Let me actually just double check that the mic is still set to the, yeah, I'm using the webcam mic, which seemed to work fine last time, so that should be good. Can hear you fine. Andrew, nice to have you here. All right, so yeah, first thing I wanted to talk about is I've written in a recent blog post that I really struggled with playing lower rated players in that I wasn't respecting them, basically. And I got burned early on in the season, losing to someone I absolutely deserved to lose. So, yeah, this was a little bit different because I knew the guy I was playing was actually the highest rated player I've played so far, and I think I maybe give him a bit too much respect, but we'll get into that. So I don't think you guys can see this. Hopefully you can't, because I want to protect the anonymity of my opponent. I'm just looking them up on the website for the league. So where am I? Oh no, there I am. Okay, so far this season I am 8 out of 11 before this game, which is somewhat misleading. I know that sounds like an incredible score, but like I said, I lost my first two games. One of them I probably shouldn't have lost, so I've played opponents that I believe are probably a little bit below my level. So let's find the Leechess, and so I'm playing as white here. So, and my current provisional still, well, it's not provisional anymore actually, because this is now way over 10 games. My rating is now 1616. So if you read my blog post, Imaginary Rating Anxiety, that was about not quite crossing 1600. I am now over that barrier, and well, no spoilers as to what it might be after this game. So my opponent, who we'll give him a nice generic Dutch name. We'll call him Jan, not his real name. We'll say Jan. So there's several ratings. Basically, the way the club does it is, obviously everyone has a FIDE rating, which is now completely irrelevant. But they also have a CAN SB rating, which was supposed to be roughly equivalent to the old FIDE ratings. They haven't adjusted it, I believe. Shit, I'm supposed to be looking to see if anyone's writing in the chat. Forget, I'm just on Twitch. I'll try and bring that up on my phone. So again, I need to streamline this, but it's my second ever stream, so please forgive me. Yeah, so I'm just going to use their CAN SB rating because I think it's more of an accurate representation. I don't think anyone knows what's happening right now in terms of the FIDE ratings, so I'll just use that. First, if you just give me a second to find my own stream on Twitch on my phone so I can read if there's any messages and I can actually check that I didn't miss anything. No. Great. So, Jan, his CAN SB rating is And this is not the highest rated player I've ever played at. It's just the highest rated player in this club in this season. I did play at a different club to start with. So it's 1867 is his current KNSB. Yeah, and we're calling him Jan. I need to remember to keep using that name. So yeah, before the game I was aware of his rating, and we did have I do like to not talk to my opponent before the game, because although I think I'm a nice guy, I do like to maintain a sort of air of yeah, just being generally grumpy and intimidating before the game. Not intimidating, but you know, I like to have a competitive match. But anyway, I did end up speaking to him before the game, and he was like, "Oh, I have 3 kids," and it was a nice. We had a really nice chat, and he seemed like a really nice guy, which was unfortunate. It's hard to have a killer instinct when you have a nice guy that you're playing. So I played d4. My opponent played knight f6, and I do like to kind of take my time, even though it's like move 1, just to give myself some settling in time. I don't want to be like massively nervous or anything, so you know, I like to stop and think, I wonder if they're going to play a King's Indian. I wonder if it's going to be a Grunfeld. I don't know. And then I played knight f3, which is, I don't play the London system. I actually just play c4, but knight f3 is a good confusing first move, because often people will assume you're going to play the London, or they're like, what is this? What is this weird? Maybe they think this guy doesn't know how to play chess because this is a strange second move, but it almost always transposes. My opponent I've already forgotten, but luckily I have covered the name. I have my notes in front of me, so from yesterday, my score sheet. I haven't put this in yet. So they played e6. So I thought, okay, maybe we're going to get a Queen's Indian. And I did stop here, and I remembered that Keith Arkell, whose opening repertoire I basically copy, he plays a Fian Kettle against the Queen's Indian, and it's all, yeah, I could kind of remember the line. There's something with like knight to h4 to trade off the light squared bishops, and that's okay. So I was trying to remember kind of how that went, or roughly where the pieces are meant to be developed to. But I didn't give too much thought to it because I know what I'm playing next regardless. I'm playing c4, which is what I played. And then my opponent played d5. So now I'm really quite happy because I love playing the Queen's Gambit. It normally leads to Carlsbad structure in which I am, I don't want to say undefeatable, but I certainly feel very comfortable in the Carlsbad structure, and I have a very good score when we get into that. So immediately I was feeling like, okay, yeah, good, I'm happy. So I took, that's what I do. I play the exchange variation. And in a perfect world, they take back with a pawn, and you know, we have a Carlsbad structure. I trade off some pieces, I execute my minority attack, I win a pawn, I win the game. That's not what happened. That's what I wished happened. They took with a knight, which is a move, I'm aware of it, I know how to respond to it, but I was just a bit like, So I play the Caro-Kann as black, so I get this structure with the opposite colors, so it's not like I don't know what I'm doing here, but I was still, you know, it's not what I wanted. And sometimes I have to watch with my own psychology when I don't get what I want out of the opening. Even if it's not bad, I can often start to let a little bit of negativity creep into my mindset, but I was good with that in this game, I believe. Oh, and by the way, just for anyone who's not aware of my analysis process, the way I analyze my games is I'm going to do 3 passes over it. So obviously no engine, you can see there's no stockfish at the top. There may be no engine at all because last time I tried to use the engine, the stream crashed. But I have tried to do some technical fixes on that. But basically, yeah, I'll do 3 passes through the analysis. And then the first pass, what I'm trying to do here is basically if I could print out my thought process and just write that down, that's what I'm trying to do. So any thoughts or feelings I had at the board, I'm going to write those down. Was I nervous? Did I really need a pee? Was I, anything that may even seem irrelevant, because patterns can emerge like that, right? And I know that's a kind of ridiculous thing to say, like, oh, I was holding in a piss and then I blundered. But, you know, it's not outlandish that these patterns can emerge. So I do think that everything is relevant, everything is worth writing down. So any thoughts I had, and the variations I'm going to put down is only the variations I calculated at the board. Now, I did go over this game in depth with my opponent afterwards. I'm not going to put those variations in now. I'm going to do them on a second pass. The first pass is just about what I thought about and what I did at the board. And I think that's really important because if you're going to improve your thought process, right, you need to have the raw thought process. And that's another reason I like to analyze as soon as I can after the game, because you start to, you know, the game sits in your head and you're like, oh, I should have played bishop b4 check there. Yeah, and then like a week later, you're like, and I did consider playing bishop b4 check here when you didn't. You thought about that like, you know, 10 minutes after the game finished. You know, then you're kind of getting an inaccurate view of your own thoughts. Every time I need the toilet, I end up in a Carlsbad structure. If only because I piss about 10 times a game, which is, I'm sure, something we'll get to. I think it's a nervousness thing. So, let's get back to this game. They played bishop b4, and now I'm out of book. Admittedly, openings are not really my thing. I do know a little bit. I certainly, you know, I've done a bit of work in terms of the plans and things in my opening. I always say I play structures, not openings, meaning I don't really know the moves. I just know the pawn structures and I know what I'm supposed to be doing. So, you know, I already stopped here and I thought for long enough that my opponent actually got up because I think they were bored. But we'll get to that in a minute as well, because I have something quite important to say about the speed at which my opponent was playing. And also, just for an interest's sake, I can talk about that now actually, but Andrew's saying, first pass is super important for me and something I need to do in the first day or two after the game before everything fades and the game begins to grow colder. Yeah, absolutely. I think the quicker you can do this, this process I'm sitting down to do now, the better. Yeah. So, yeah, like I said, I was kind of out of book here, and I thought maybe does it bear some similarities to the Rogozin, where I can play, I think it's the Rogozin. Anyway, there's a version of the Queen's Gambit declined exchange where they take with the pawn, and the bishop comes out to here early, and you play this check. And the reason you play that check is because they're then forced to defend with the c6 knight, or take, and if they take, great. Oh no, they can't take because they're in check, sorry. So they're forced to defend with the c6 knight, and what that means is they can't then easily play the move c6, which is a move they want to play when the pawn's on this square, because they're just, you know, keeping everything nice and tidy. So you kind of misplaced the knight a little bit. Anyway, that's not relevant here, I realized pretty quickly, because the knight is defending this bishop. So even if I play queen a4 check, they don't have to play knight to c6. So I dismissed that pretty quickly. And actually, I just thought defending with the queen either on c2 or on b3 was a little bit awkward because it doesn't break the pin. And I was a little bit worried about them playing c6 or even just straight away playing c4, right? Sorry, c5, because if they play c5, now, you know, I have some issues with this pawn, and the queen can now come out. The pin still isn't broken. I don't know, it felt unnecessarily complicated, and I know I want to develop this dark squared bishop outside the pawn chain, but I felt like, okay, I'm just going to play this. This breaks the pin, and I figured I could trade off a few pieces early, and this comes back to the whole psychology of what I was talking about. I felt throughout the game, because my opponent was a bit stronger, I also, because I chatted to them before the game, which as I said I don't like doing, I also found out this was their 18th season at the club. Their birth year, let me just check on the club website stats. They're not that old, although it sounds like 18 years. How old was he? 100? He wasn't 100. He was born in 1977, so, you know, you do the maths. He was old, but not like close to death. So, yeah. Right, so yeah, so I think I was trying to play like simpler, just like safe, solid chess, which I play anyway, that's my style, but I think you'll see what I mean in a minute more so. And I'll just mention now, because I was going to, I do think that adults, right, I wrote about this in today's blog post, and I've written about this before, that I am terrible at blitz, and I know, Andrew, if you're still watching, that you maybe mentioned this to me as well, that compared to my rating peers, like if I play a classical game against someone who's around my level and I say, what's your blitz rating online? Like, for example, my opponent, the pretend name Jan today, he told me his online blitz rating on Lichess is over 2,000. My blitz rating on Lichess is like 1,500 or 1,600 or something. So, you know, that's a much larger difference compared to our over-the-board ratings. And yeah, that's been pretty consistent for almost everyone I've played. They've all been like, oh yeah, my blitz rating 1,900, 1,800, 2,000. Everyone I've played at is around sort of 1,600 plus at the club. And I think, and they all learned chess as kids. So I do think that just the speed at which he was thinking was way faster. And I confirmed that in our analysis afterwards. Because there was a few complicated positions. It was like, why is this guy not calculating as much as I am? It turned out he was. He was just doing it at twice the speed I was doing it at. So that was quite revealing to me, you know, because this is like a mid-1800s player. So, and someone who's been over, let me just check I'm not lying. Yeah, someone who's been over 1900 in the past as well. So, not, you know, someone that's a good player. So that was interesting that his calculation speed was definitely faster than mine. Anyway, let's get back to the game. He castled. Exciting stuff. And yeah, here's where so this is the logic behind this. So I took the knight. And the reason I took the knight was because I want to have the Carlsbad structure. So, right, I'm going to write that down actually, because this is the first, I think, thought process bias that I might be discovering here, right? Because any kind of faulty thought processes or potential faulty thought processes, I want to be seriously aware of. 46 is old, oof. Good maths, Andrew. I find it really intimidating if they have a high blitz rating. As you know, to me, it feels like if they paid attention, slowed down, they'd be far stronger. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but I really think he was just like he wasn't that he wasn't thinking. He was just good. Yeah, I won't say that's old. I don't think it's so old. So I was hoping they took with the pawn here, and I have a Carlsbad. Obviously, they take with the pawn, they blunder the bishop, so they're not going to do that. I knew they were going to throw in the intermediate move, which. I mean, I think it's forced, right? So they take here. I took with the queen, I believe. Let's see, double checking I'm not insane. Yeah, and here again, I was really hoping they take with the pawn, and I just have a nice Carlsbad. They did not. They took with the queen. So now I thought, what did I play next? Actually, oh yeah, right. So yeah, this is my point where I start thinking. Oh wait, I was gonna. Sorry. I interrupted myself. It was your fault, Andrew. Yeah, I was going to write down here. I was really hoping for Carlsbad to appear out of nowhere. So I initiated this trade, you know, based on that hope, rather than on it. I'm really tired. Any like any concrete reason, or any reason that I thought I was better or somehow better off from this sequence. So. Let me just read that and see if that makes any sense. I was really hoping for Carlsbad. Based on that hope rather than any concrete reason or any reason I was better off from the sequence. Yeah, I think that's honest. Okay, so I took the queen. They took here. Yeah, and now, okay, yeah, I play e3. Right? Why? I assume I played e3. Yeah, why would I play anything else? Then they played knight d7. So when they played this move, I was pretty sure they wanted to go for this break. Now, I was kind of happy to invite that because now we can trade queens, and I'm actually, you know, Yeah, well, in that case, I'd be really happy, right? They might be going for this break. Like, either way, I thought they were going for the break, and after I take, you know, they're forced to trade queens because their queen is hanging. Or at least I thought they would trade queens. So my exact calculation was like, okay, they're going for or I don't know, it's not really a calculation, is it? I thought they were going for c5 or e5. I thought e5 made a little bit more sense because it opens up the light squared bishop. But then I thought, okay, they'll trade queens, and I'm just fine with that. Either I end up with a 4 versus 3 on the king side, so I still have this minority on the queen side that I like playing with. Or if they play c5, I end up in a completely symmetrical 4 versus 4 on the king side, 2 versus 2 on the queen side. And I play that all the time with the black pieces when I play the semi-Tarrasch defense. So that's a super boring endgame, but I really trust myself in the endgame. I know, again, I keep saying I wrote about this in a blog, but I did. I wrote a blog post called The Random Skills of Adult Improvers, where I talked about how we just haven't played chess for long enough. Like, I've played chess for 3.5 years, or not even 3.5, 3 and a bit years, which might seem like a long time, but you know how long it takes to get good at anything in chess, so that's like no time at all. And I spent a long period of that studying endgame. So even though that's a completely, I don't think I'm better or anything, I trust that it's like my elo goes up. My rating increases in the endgame somehow. So I felt like I was fine there. So I liked all of this. So basically I didn't, for that reason, and I know this is kind of weird, but I thought they're going to play c5, I'm going to take. Then they're going to trade queens, and I'm going to take with the king. Now, where does my king want to go in that structure? Well, let's take a look. So I thought, right, I need to give the move to black here. So let's just play a nothing move for me, which we'll get back to because this is actually what I played. Right, I play a nothing move. They play c5. Let's say I take, they take, I take, they take. I want my king to use this square. Right, so I can now develop a bishop out, I don't know if it, probably here, even though I don't really want it staring at this wall of granite. So maybe I put it here, but then does that, yeah, maybe here's better. I'm not sure. So I thought my king wants to be tucked in on e2, right? My king is centralized and active, whereas they've already castled. And in the endgame, I prefer my king there. It's covering potential entry squares on the d file from there. I like it. I like my king there. So that was one. And let's look at what would happen if they played e5 then. Again, I was going to take. And then they trade. Oh, well, in this case they can't take though. So I guess they can't. They're not ready for e5. But let's, in a world where they are, maybe if it's somehow prepared, then it was the same thing, right? I want my king to be able to tuck into e2. This is all a long way of me saying I didn't want to put my bishop on e2, right? If we go back to this position here, this move, I didn't want to put the bishop on e2 because my king wants to use that square in the event that we have this trade. And I didn't want to put it on d3 because that avoids the queen trade, right? Even if they play this, right? So, yeah, I wanted to wait a move, basically. I also, obviously, I can't put the bishop here because I lose the bishop. So I played a3, just saying, well, what are you going to do? I figured that, development wasn't really critical here. I'm not behind in development, and, there's nothing, I don't think there's anything happening. This also has the added effect of liberating the rook from the defense of the a-pawn. So that's what I played. Maybe y'all think I'm insane now. He played knight f6. Yeah, fine. I was aware that he can now jump in here and hit the queen, but I wasn't really bothered by it. Oh, let me promote this because this is the actual game. Sorry. Still not keeping an eye on the chat. Come on. Oh, I almost reported you by mistake, Andrew. I can't see it for some reason. Hearing a d4 player's thought process is illuminating. Yeah, I know. I think very much in terms of pawn structure and piece placement. I'm aware that crazy e4 people are like, oh, how do I checkmate people? I'm like, I don't want to checkmate you. I just want to survive. All right. So now I played rook c1. It seemed like quite a good move because it forces a response from black. The c7 pawn is hanging. I did consider if they play, you know, I was always considering, right, that they have this as a sort of intermediate move at all times. I should probably write that down. I was aware that they have knight e4 as an intermediate move, and that was always part of my calculations, as we will see. Okay, I assume they played c6. Yeah, they played c6, which makes sense. Now I became I should write this down. Right, now, and I wonder if it's because of the visuals of these two pawns here, but I became very aware of the potential, I'll say, for black's bishop to be permanently... I can't type and talk at the same time, but I feel like it'll be boring if I just go quiet and type. Permanent. You'd think I was like a writer for a living or something. Permanently. Shite. So I was thinking about this bishop. How can I make this bishop terrible forever? That was very much on my mind. So I now played bishop c4, developing a piece with a gain of time. And I was aware that this diagonal, it's not like lighting up the whole world because it's a blunted diagonal, but I did still think that the bishop was good here. You know, there's always the chance my opponent will lose their mind and play b5, which I would have been quite happy with. I mean, obviously not right now, but at some point later, and then the c6 pawn would be very weak. And I know that is something that people do in this sort of Scandinavian Karo structure. This is called the Karo-Slav structure, by the way, but it occurs in the Scandinavian as well, where thematically the queen gets kicked around. This obviously not a Scandinavian, but same structure. So slightly horrifying thought process of the d4 player. That's funny. So I expected them to pull the queen all the way back. They did not. Where did they stick it? Right on the edge of the board, if I remember correctly. Yeah, queen h5. I did start thinking, like, am I in any, like, is there any threat with knight to g4 or knight to e4? I just thought, no, there's not. They do not have enough pieces. You know, I thought, well, what if they sacrifice a pawn playing e5? Not right now, but you know, that was something I became aware of. Like, the queen is now kind of aggressively posted over there. So here's how my thought process now went. I started thinking about, how do I make this the worst bishop on the planet? And that should be like maybe a little bit of an advantage. The first thing I thought is I really don't like them playing the move c5. I don't really want to allow that, because that gives the bishop eventual scope. And so I think I just played b4. I figured I have enough time. This is a quiet enough position. I don't need a castle yet. So I played b4 with the idea that I'm really locking down this square. And yeah, it now becomes really hard for black to play c5. They played bishop to d7, confirming that this bishop is now a pawn. He said arrogantly. Now I really had my first like proper think of the game. So first proper think. I mean, I say proper think. It's the first time I really, maybe apart from that, the early being out of book in the opening thing, I had a good think here. about two possible candidate moves. So my first move was to play queen to e2. Because I was kind of thinking like maybe they are going to play knight to g4. Yeah, so yeah, these, right, let me just talk about queen e2 first. I considered queen e2 with the idea that I'm going to play knight to e5 in the next move, and then we're going to trade queens. I get what I want, I get my endgame, and I feel like I'm a little bit better because their bishop sucks, especially if the knight can get to e5. But what I was thinking was, after queen e2, maybe they play knight to g4, which stops me from playing knight to e5. But now that I'm looking at this, I think that's just kind of ridiculous because I can just kick the knight back immediately. Well, I don't really know why I didn't think about that. Like, can I not just play h3? Yeah, I think I can just play h3 and the knight goes away. Yeah, and actually, yeah. I don't think it's a problem. Alright, so I thought about that, but that's why I didn't play it, but that's definitely something to consider. So, didn't play queen e2 first. Oh, chat, come on, remember to look at it. Any considerations for bishop e2? Yeah, I thought about bishop putting. Oh, right, because of the threat against the queen. Interesting. Yeah, I did briefly consider it, but I thought it was like it's not a real threat. I didn't think so. I thought they would just move the queen, and then I didn't actually want the queen on g5 or. But yeah, maybe it's interesting. Let's have a look. So put this in as a suggested alternative. Yeah, I just thought I'm moving the bishop twice in the opening, and I know I'm moving the queen a second time, but I feel like I have slightly more concrete reasons for that. Yeah, maybe it's annoying, because now I was aware that the queen is kind of running out of squares, but the queen now has this square to come back to, guess. To be a bit careful, though. Ooh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, they have to be careful that the queen doesn't get trapped, but I don't think that the queen is getting trapped. And where do they put the queen? Yeah, maybe this actually looks better than... Maybe I should have considered this. So I'll write this down that, like, you know, this briefly entered my mind, but I dismissed it without calculating, which is true. Which actually happens later in the game. There's a couple of times I notice I do this. I look at a move and I don't actually calculate, right? It's one of my candidate moves, but I'm just like, nah, I don't like that. It's more like a feeling or something. So that's something I have to watch, because I think that doing that is not ideal. Obviously, there's no point in even having a move pop into your head if you're not actually going to calculate as to whether or not it's good, because as I was saying at the start of this, I really think that adults who learn chess can't trust your intuition. You have to calculate. And I think that's why I'm able to mask how terrible I am at blitz and rapid chess at classical, or rather how I play at a higher level the slower it gets, because my calculation manages to mask my lack of intuition or pattern recognition, maybe. All right, so did think about this, but yeah, for some reason didn't like knight g4. But actually, in hindsight, I think it's fine. So because I thought this stopped knight e5, but I didn't calculate far enough. But I never even considered or looked further than this, which is actually quite concerning that I didn't calculate any further than a singular move. Should not write off a move because of this. So, yeah, that's definitely something that we could maybe improve on here, is thinking a bit further. Okay, so the move I did play was I played knight e5 immediately because, yeah, let me just double check I haven't missed anything here. E3, knight e4, a3, knight f6, rook c1, bishop d7, knight e5. Yeah, I played this immediately because because I thought maybe I wouldn't get the time to. What did they play? They put the rook on the open file. The rook a to d8. So, rook a to d8. Let me promote this because this is the game. Promote the variation. If you're not familiar with Lee chess studies, just makes it the main line. And after this, I played queen e2 in accordance with my plan. I did calculate that they might play queen g5. Oh, sorry. They wouldn't play that, would they? That was a misclick. They could play queen g5, but that queen is really running out of squares, and actually my opponent did say after the game that that's exactly what they thought. Again, like I said, they were playing really quick. They built up like a 20-minute time advantage pretty quickly against me. So they didn't really think much about this. They just traded queens, and he said it wasn't based on anything other than he felt like his queen was running out of squares, and it is. So I can understand. So I took with the king. So now I feel like we're in an endgame, and I liked my position. This bishop is terrible. I have achieved what I wanted. They can't play e5. They can't play c5. Right? They can't even play b6 and c5. It's not looking great for them. So this is where I think my thought process goes to shit. Because I was aware of all this, right? I thought I liked my position. I didn't think I was better, but I did. So, by the way, whenever I enter the end game or like the queens come off, I always get up and walk around. I actually think that's really important because the nature of the game has changed. And yeah, I also do this as soon as I'm out of the opening. I'll get up and walk around and just be like, hey, the opening is over. Now I'm going to tell myself that, right? Because a lot of the time in the opening, you're either playing moves from memory or, it's just good to have like a hard reset, I think, just to go away and remind yourself that the nature of the game has changed. So I got up, and my sort of thoughts and my little wonder about was, I have a more comfortable position. But I don't think I'm better. Or rather, I don't think I'm that much better. So I evaluated this as maybe like half a pawn better for white, maybe 0.7 or 8 if I'm being really generous. But I didn't think that I was winning or anything. And I knew that I had to come up with a plan here. So I decided that my plan was going to be, and I really think this is the wrong plan, but I'm almost embarrassed to talk about it. But so I thought I was going to double the rooks on the c file and aim to play the move b5, eventually infiltrating on the c file with the rooks. Except I just don't think it's a very good plan. I mean, maybe it's okay, but that's what I came up with. So that was my plan, basically. So I'll write that down. It's really hard, I think, to analyze your chess games, especially when you think you made... I'm going to turn the heating off. It's boiling here all of a sudden. Yeah, it's hard to admit a lot of the time to yourself in chess, especially if you, in hindsight, you think that you did something terrible. It's hard to be honest about your thought process, but I do think it's really important. I think that's the only way to actually improve is to... Any thoughts on b5? Yeah, I can talk about that in a second. I definitely have thoughts about b5. Yeah, I think it's good to be honest. So my plan, let me just write this down, Andrew, and then I will talk about b5. My plan was to double the rooks on the c file and play for an eventual b5 to open the c file up. Now, you know, I think one of the reasons I don't like this is it gives their bishop a life potentially in some future where that pawn moves. But, you know, what else am I going to do here? I mean, the other option is to try and expand in the center, maybe with f3 and e4, but I don't know. Maybe f3 is an interesting move. That could be another plan. I mean, that's something I don't really want to explore on this pass through the analysis, but something I'll do later, right? I don't want to think about things I didn't think about at the board. And that's certainly not a plan I thought about at the board. I was like, this is my plan, and I felt good about it. So the move b5, I think, now, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think this is a kind of anti-positional move because it puts another pawn on the light square of their bishop, right? And once I move away, this pawn becomes a real target now, right? Now I'm actually feeling like I have serious initiative on the c file against this backward c pawn. So b5 was not a move I was worried about. In fact, I think I would be quite pleased to see the move b5 on the board. And I can just play against the backward c6 pawn. So hopefully that answers your question. And I totally relate to what you're saying when you're saying I have no idea how to play this game. Coming at it with my caveman e4 brain. Don't feel bad about that, Andrew, because I do actually think that... by the way, can everyone see the top of the board? On... oh, is it because I moved it down? But please let me know if you can't see the top of the board. You also can't see the bottom of the analysis board. Maybe I should move my camera up so that people can see what I'm writing, if they would prefer that. It does disappear when I'm annotating. Alright, let me try and make sure that I don't touch the Lichess thing. Alright, thank you for answering that. Yeah, when I'm analyzing with e4 players that are like roughly the same level as me, and I don't think you're too far off my level, Andrew, if I'm remembering correctly, then yeah, I also feel very confused by their games. So again, I do think it's this lack of experience of the adult chess learner that you kind of have to specialize at a certain point, and you know, no one needs to look at my face. I can just make my face a lot smaller. I can put my face somewhere, I don't know, here. You can let me know if you need me to move my face or remove it altogether. Right, what's my point? I can't remember where I've lost my train of thought. I remember this, I used to stream when I was a young man about a decade ago, and I do remember it's kind of exhausting sometimes to constantly narrate, and you get a bit lost, so bear with me. Right, I am currently annotating a chess game. So my plan was to double the rooks. Yeah, right, and I was saying I don't want to talk about plans that I didn't consider in the game, because this is the first pass through the analysis. Just want to talk about what I did think about right now. I just want to get my thoughts down on paper. Okay, it's black's move. Do I remember what they played? I think I do. I think they played knight d5. Yeah, knight d5. Makes sense. Put the knight in the middle of the board. And I have on my score sheet here a big star next to this move because in the game I remember thinking it was terrible. So I now proceed with my plan to double my rooks. Don't think this was a good idea because I changed my mind, right? And I'm going to write this down. At this point, I've picked a plan. Oh, I've done it again. I've moved the board. Picked a plan. It just moves without... you're just going to have to deal with it. I'll move the board back. At this point, I've picked a plan. And I'm sticking to it. Great news. If you pick a plan, stick to it. I mean, you can abandon it if it's terrible, right? But I don't think my plan is necessarily terrible, it's just maybe suboptimal. Anyway, my opponent then plays rook to e6, rook to e8, sorry. So now, I should write this down. So now I'm sure my opponent wants to play f6, kicking the knight, in order to break with e5. That's what I thought. Now, spoiler alert, that's actually not what my opponent had planned. So I thought that they were going to go for this, kick the knight back, and try and push through with e5 to open up this bishop, get their pawns in dark squares. Yeah, and open up both of their rooks, right, on now an open and semi-open file. So that's what I thought. That's not what my opponent was actually wanting to do. They did want to play f6, but they were going to go and start launching these pawns down the board and gaining space on the king side. That's something I need to look at because I didn't even consider that as a possibility. Hello, good evening. Nice to see someone analyzing a game seriously. Thank you. I do believe that this process that I'm doing now is the only way for an adult to actually improve. I mean, there are other things, of course, you can do to improve on top of this, but I really think that this is an important part of the process. I've enjoyed watching, but need to go make tea for the family. All right, thanks so much for dropping by. I appreciate it. I will upload this to YouTube, so if you want to watch the rest another time, you can. Yeah, an insight into my strange d4 player mind. But there you go. All right. What have we got next? So rook e8. Yeah, so I thought that was their plan. And now this is important. So I didn't like, this is the point at which I was saying I should have analyzed, I should have calculated, and I didn't. I didn't calculate very far, and I definitely didn't evaluate. Right? I mean, if you don't calculate to a set endpoint, you can't evaluate, which is clearly a thought process error, right? I mean, if I'm gonna dismiss, like if I'm gonna say, oh, I don't like f6 and e5, like why? Like where am I ending my calculation? Do I take on e5 and they take back and now they have an isolated e pawn, like, or do they take with the rook and like what did I not like? You know, if they take with the rook, do they plan to play f5, f4 to try and open the e file completely? Do they then double on the d file? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I didn't look, and if you don't look, you can't have an opinion about it, right? The whole point of calculating is to form an opinion. Although maybe the e4 players are saying no, the whole point of calculating is to checkmate your opponent. I don't know. Yeah, I did not look, and so this I think is actually a really key learning moment for me. Even though like I don't think I made a huge chess error here. It was definitely a massive thought process error in that I did not even, I just went f6 e4 plan, f6 e5 plan. I don't like it, so I'm dismissing it before I even calculate. That's not okay. So what I did next is probably even worse. So I'm still kind of obsessing over the fact that I want this to turn into a Carlsbad structure because it's my safety net, right? It's where I feel comfortable. It's like my kid's favorite soft toy or something, the Carlsbad structure for me. So so you can guess what I did. I'm just gonna write that down here. So I'm still obsessing over the opening I didn't get. But wanted. And so I think here, what I did was I took on c5, I think. I didn't do anything else weird first, did I? No, I took on d5. Now, this, I think it just has to be wrong, because as soon as they take back, their bishop has a life. This is how I justified it to myself, right? First of all, there was, like I said, there was definitely the thought process error of I want my Carlsbad. Sorry, absolutely boiling hot. I'm not taking all my clothes off. But I did have some reasons behind it. One, right, this, I think I was like, yeah, get my Carlsbad. But, my pieces aren't really optimally set up for a minority attack plan anyway, that I was thinking was the reason I wanted this. But more than that, I've solved my opponent's biggest problem, which is this bishop. Like, either way that they take, this bishop is better. So, anyway, my calculations were if they take back with this pawn, now I am going to take the bishop, because the bishop is going to have a life. And this is unfortunately the game continuation. So I think if I had any advantage, even if it wasn't like even if Stockfish, I don't think Stockfish will say I have an advantage here. I still think the position is probably quite equal. But I do think from a human perspective, I maybe have a more comfortable game. Because they have a problem to solve with this bishop, and it's unclear. Like, my rooks can go on the c-file. Like, their rooks, I mean, apart from maybe this plan, like the rooks right now are not so active. Anyway, so I don't know what you guys think of this decision, but I thought if they took back with the c pawn, then this was definitely better. Now we're in like a sort of exchange Slav structure, and I thought I could immediately infiltrate. This I do think is much better for me. But they didn't do that. They took with the e-pawn, because I guess they're good at chess. I can write that I did think. This I did think was better for me. Okay. Alright, so you can guess what I played next if you're aware of this structure. And again, I just think it looks ugly. By the way, I knew I wanted to play this move because I want to play the move b5 to execute my minority attack. So that's another reason I needed to take the light squared bishop, right? I can't allow this. This would be unfortunate if I'd left that piece on the board. So yeah, just to point, from here. All right. Now, my opponent played a6, which is a move you can play. It doesn't stop the minority attack, it slows it down. If you're not aware of what a minority attack is, you're about to become aware. That's when you have a minority attack, a minority of pawns, and they have a majority here. And that's going to leave them with a weak pawn, as you'll see in a minute. All right. I played a4 now because that's what I mean. It slows the attack down in that normally if they don't play a6, I'm going to play b5. a6 means that I have to prepare b5 by playing a4 first. So it slows it down by one move, but not really, right? There's going to be a slightly different structure at the end of it. Because they spend a tempo in this move, I spend a tempo in this move. It doesn't cost me time. So I guess you're not really slowing it down at all. Okay. Yeah. Then they played f5, and during the game I was really annoyed. So now I'm annoyed because I've had this happen to me before in a pure Rukan game, where, as you can see, black can do exactly the same thing to me that I'm trying to do to them, right? Just to point out what I'm talking about, by the way, because maybe it takes us some time to get there. I'm going to play this move. We just forget all the pieces on the board at this point. Now, either they're going to take here, and then they're going to have two weak pawns. Or I'm going to take here, and they're going to have this backwards pawn on c6. Now, black can do exactly the same thing to me, right? They can go like this, and let's just play, I don't know, a nothing move for me. And they're going to take, and I'm going to take back, right? And now I have a weak pawn here, and that they can target. So they can basically do the exact same thing, and we'd end up with this sort of completely mirrored pawn structure where they have a weak pawn here, I have a weak pawn here. you know, I'm definitely not better. So the reason I was annoyed is because, let me just get rid of all this nonsense. The reason I'm annoyed is because, again, I need to sort out something on the stream so that I don't need to keep moving the board down. I feel like the bishop problem would be solved one way or the other now. Seems a reasonable plan. Alright. I don't actually know when you wrote that, Andrew. I have no timestamps on this, but I'm sure you have a good point. So the reason I'm annoyed is because Keith Arkell is like my hero. He loves he'd probably win this position. He loves an even rook endgame. He's known as the endgame grinder. His favorite move to play in chess is g4 with the white pieces, or g5 with the black pieces. Because in an endgame, a lot of the time, that is not a ridiculous move to play. You're just gaining space, and space can be really important, particularly if you're going to transpose into, a king and pawn endgame later. It's good to have your pawns advanced. So the move g4 was something. Now I don't know that it's good, right? But I just know sitting in the game thinking, I should have played g4 instead. Because if I play g4, they can't play f5. And I will analyze this when I do the second pass of the game, probably, which I won't do today. I don't think I'll have time. But I was aware it's the Keith Arkell move. And actually, I thought maybe I have something to learn from this game after my opponent played f5. So after they played f5, I wondered and was somewhat upset that I hadn't even considered g4. And I guess I have to admit that I hadn't really considered that black can, minority attack me in a way with their f pawn, with their 3 pawns against my 4 on the king side. And I'm annoyed because I lost an annoying. It was just a rapid game, I think. I don't actually remember the game. But this did happen. I did end up losing the game. There were queens on the board in that game, if I remember correctly. But so yeah, I'll look at the move g4 when I do another pass. But I wonder if that's a good move because it prevents f5 in this particular position, like immediately. I don't know. Maybe it's trash, but I'll take a look. Anyway, those were my thoughts and feelings. And like I said, I'm here to document my thoughts and feelings as I had them at the board right now. I'm trying to be as honest as possible so that I can make improvements to it. Okay, I played g3. Again, kind of like them playing a6 to slow it down. I knew that they could play g5 and push through anyway. But I figured this was better because if I go ahead, I don't actually know why, because they don't have time to play f4. If I play b5, they take, I take. I play b5. Yeah, they don't have time to play f4, so I didn't calculate that either. Maybe it's part of my annoyance. So now I'm annoyed, right? So we can write this down. Maybe I'm annoyed and now I'm not calculating all of a sudden. So I didn't even, notice that f4 is impossible because black will lose the c6 pawn. g6 is unnecessary. And just so you guys can follow that, if I play this move and they play this move, I'm just going to take this pawn. This is terrible. Yes, black can now take here. They have completed their own minority attack. But I'm just going to take this pawn. This pawn is weak. This I have a passed pawn. This does not look good for black. So that's not possible. Okay, I did play g3. They played g5, I think. Yeah. And then I played b5. I did now at this point realize, they can't play f4. Takes. I take back. And no, wait, this is absolutely not what happened in the game. This can't be what happens. Because I remember they took this way, which may be surprising. I took this way, and then they surprised me. They played a5. And I want to write down that this move surprised me because, so what are the reasons that this move surprised me? First reason is because I am so used to executing a successful minority attack that I was just like, yeah. You know, you take, and then you're gonna take here, and you're gonna have an isolated pawn, and now you have 2 isolated pawns, and I'm doing great, which I am. But my opponent didn't do that, so I just went on to the complete autopilot here. I was just like, yeah, minority attack, they have a weakness, all is well in the world of chess. So yeah, this move surprised me because I allowed myself to be surprised because I didn't calculate, and I went into autopilot mode. All right, but in the end, actually, I decided it was okay. I played a6. I figured that at this point I was actually optimistic. Falsely so, I think. So I felt really good here. In fact, I felt kind of arrogant. I felt like, here we go. My opponent doesn't understand the endgame, and I do. And I am brilliant at chess. Very good here. I thought, here we go. I'm better at endgames. And that comes from, this is terribly arrogant, but that does come from a place where a lot of the time I'll struggle against an opponent who's around my level, and we'll get into the end game, and I'm like, what? They just capitulate, and I feel like it's because they haven't studied it or something. So, I don't want to be too harsh on myself. I do think there's like something to what I'm saying. But in this case, it was misplaced arrogance. My opponent definitely knew what they were doing. So yeah, I thought these are all weak, right? These are all targets. I'm gonna be fine. I'm gonna get them. What did they play? A4, G3, G5, B5. It takes A4. What? Wait, hold on. I'm misreading this. So they played A5. I played B6. I've written down A6 on my score sheet. They played A4. Oh yeah, and this is the only time my opponent thought for more than like 2 minutes in the whole game. So after a deep think, my opponent played this. So that did make me give serious consideration to the move, because they spent about 15 minutes on this move, so they'd clearly done a lot of calculating, and I knew their rating, so I trusted that if they think this is a good move, it's definitely worth giving serious consideration to. So first move I thought about, rook c7. That was one candidate. And the other candidate is just like trying to round up this pawn because it's dangerous. So, I thought about this, and I thought about this. So these are my 3 candidates. I ended up dismissing this pretty quickly, because I thought if I want to add more pressure, I probably want to add it from the side, and this square is controlled. So it just seemed like if I'm going to put a rook over there, it should maybe be that one, but maybe that was faulty. So I really calculated quite hard here. I did my work. So I thought after rook c7, they would take. I would take back. They would play rook to c8, and I'm sure it's very obvious to you what I would play now. But in my calculation, I thought, oh, then I have to play rook c1. Clearly, I don't have to play rook c1. I can take on b7. So I missed this. I thought I had to play this. It's funny that I thought that this was such an intense calculation. It's really not that many moves, huh? That's interesting. I thought I had to play this. And actually I thought that this was kind of unclear because my king actually struggles to deal with the a3 pawn. I can't come in front of my rook because they'll take the pawn. And I thought that, you know, if they just start shoving it, like if I want to somehow, you know, I was just eventually we're just going to swap these pawns, is what I thought. And they have this pawn, and they're going to get behind it, and I don't like it. So that was my evaluation, but obviously I think actually if I can take on b7, it becomes wild. I don't know that this is winning, but I didn't even consider it. So yeah, I'll write that. I don't know if this is winning, but I didn't consider it. So back to the game. So for that reason I dismissed it in the end, but I did take a lot of time over this. In the end I played rook a2, and the next series of moves happened really quickly. I did follow my own advice from my blog's post, look both ways when you cross the road, in which I talk about how I have a tendency to calculate a long sequence, which I think is forcing, and then instantly play every move, because I'm like saying to my opponent, look, I've already done my thinking, I don't need to think anymore, how great am I? Which is obviously the wrong thing to do. It's like some kind of intimidation tactic, or I don't know, it's some way of me thinking I have some kind of psychological edge. Doesn't matter if you have a psychological edge if you make a blunder during that sequence, as I have learned the hard way. So I figured that it was forced, and I did play these moves quite quickly, but I am happy to report, why can we promote this one? Happy to report that I did take my time between each move. I gave myself like 20 to 30 seconds just to make sure I wasn't missing anything obvious, but it was quite quick. I figured they have to defend the pawn, only one way to do it. Then I wanted to attack the pawn a second time, at which point they can't save the pawn, right? They can actually shove it, but it doesn't really matter. Now they still can't save it. So I was aware of that. So I thought after I play this, they're just going to go after my pawn, pointing out that after I take this, they're going to take my pawn. And I saw that this was going to happen, and I suddenly realized that actually I'm not only not better here, I'm actually worse. But I figured this was my best chance. So I took, they took back, I took, they took this pawn. I gave this check, king came up. I think the king came to f7. Yeah. And I figured, okay, at least I can get behind the pawn. I've studied these positions a lot, these rook and pawn endgame positions, and I know that there is some danger here, and I know what I have to do. They are going to promote this pawn, and the way they're going to do it is they're going to push it all the way to the third rank. They're going to put the rook on b1. They're going to bring the king over. Let's put this in a different color. They're going to bring the king over. They're going to hide the king here to defend the pawn, and that's going to liberate the rook from in front of the pawn. Then they're going to be able to promote it. Now, all of that takes a lot of time, and what that gives me time to do is grab some kingside pawns, potentially. And what I'm hoping is that when they promote, and I have to sacrifice my rook for the pawn, that my king is so active over here somewhere, and I have so many passed pawns that they're going to have to sacrifice their rook back for one of my pawns, and I survive. So I knew that was the lie of the land at this stage. I wasn't really sure how to execute that practically, I'll have to say. I floundered a bit. but at least I knew what I was going to do. So, you know, there you go. There's your adults learn chess over, you know, maybe our intuition isn't, oh, sorry. Our intuition isn't as good as people who've played their whole lives. But, oh, let me promote that. But, you know, we can study, we can learn these things so that you can think about it consciously at the board. Even though this is not a subconscious pattern, I knew this. Okay, so I thought there were some problems with the rook to b2 check with all of my pawns being on the second rank, so
past pawns that they're going to have to sacrifice their rook back for one of my pawns.
What is happening?
And I survive.
Okay, something happened with Twitch and I was heating myself. Okay, so yeah, that's roughly what I think is going to happen. So I played h4. I was getting a pawn off the back rank. I actually thought if they took in the game, this was really bad. When I looked at this with my opponent, because I thought my king can now come up, right? And maybe this pawn's weak, this pawn's weak. Like, I'm getting my counterplay, right, for this pawn somehow, I thought. But actually, I think their king can actually come in, and actually maybe it's my pawn that's weak, not theirs. But again, that was explored after the game. I couldn't work out all the details, but I thought they would push. They didn't push first, they gave this check, I believe. Yeah, they did this first and then they pushed. And yeah, I'm not happy at this point, but I also didn't feel that bad. And I think part of me not feeling bad was the disparity in rating between my opponents and the experience level of my opponent. But also, I just, you know, I felt like I'd played okay. I wasn't being too rough with myself at this stage, I will say. So I would say I thought I was worse here. Maybe there was some hope. Maybe there was some hope, but you know, I didn't feel too bad. I did think I was way worse though. I mean, I thought even like practically, like they have so much space. Like the way you're supposed to get counterplay when they have the outside pass pawn is that you have the space, and that you're trying to get these kingside pawns. So I didn't feel good about myself or my position. Like I said, about myself, I didn't feel that bad. Okay, so it was rook b2 check, king f1 g4. Then I played rook h8. My idea here was I want to go after these pawns, and what this does is it deflects the king from the defense of this square, if they want to keep their h pawn, that is, which my opponent did want to keep this pawn. So they played, sorry, struggling to see my notes here. Rook h8. Shit, I missed a move in my annotations here. That's really annoying. All right, I remember they put the king here. And then I continued my plan. Now I'm going to have to read all of the notation backwards, which is really annoying because I skipped a move. Now they played this weird move, which I actually thought was kind of bad. They played b5. So I thought maybe they want to just come back and defend this pawn. They didn't. Put the rook on e5, attacking the pawns. They kept pushing. I took the pawn. I was aware of when I needed to get behind the pawn, and I was always calculating that. They played, they pushed the pawn further. Now, this is as far as the pawn can go. It's very important to keep the space for the king, and I knew that. Okay, b3. I played. Now I put the rook behind the pawn, and I think I have to, but maybe because well, let's say I do. What can I even do? There's not really much I can do. I did think about this, by the way. I thought, like, okay, this is cool, but I didn't play that. I just played this because I thought if I don't, then they have time to get the rook out, you know, outside and then push. Anyway, I come behind the pawn now. I don't know if it's critical. I'm really getting tired now. I was tired during the game. I've had a long day today as well, this analysis. I can't bring myself to calculate right now. You'll just... Oh. Why is the analysis board disappeared? Can you guys see the board? Oh, it's back. Huh. I keep periodically looking at the stream. But I've got it on my phone. I don't need to do that. I can just look at it on my phone to make sure everything's fine. Alright, the stream is back. Okay. Yeah, I'm getting tired, so let's just get through to the end of this, because the conclusion is pretty quick now. After an instructive move, so let's get to at least one instructive moment today. Not sure it's been fine. They played rook b1 check. Makes sense. Put the king on g2. And guess what my opponent played next? It ends the game, effectively. They played the move b2. Can't play b2. I breathed a massive sigh of relief when they played b2. This is a draw now. The reason it's a draw is because if black ever wants to promote this pawn, they're going to have to use the king, right? They can't move the rook away from the pawn because I'll take it. So they're going to need to move the king over. And what can I do when they move the king over here? Well, as soon as the king comes in contact with the pawn, I have infinite checks. Forever. So this pawn is now unpromotable unless I make a horrific error. Now, such horrific errors, just to point out, could be something like the move f3. Because now they can move the rook away with check. Okay, and so then they can promote. So it's actually really important that the king stays on these two squares of G and H. And actually, just to quickly set up a position, if you guys are interested, to show exactly why that is, let's set up basically the same position here with king here. So we just remove everything else from the board to point out why that's important. So the reason your king has to stay here, right, is as soon as you move the king this way, they can actually now play this. And if you take the pawn, you lose your rook. So can't do that. And as we saw, if you move the king anywhere up onto the third rank, they have this check. So you just have to, these are the key squares for the king, you have to keep it on G2 and H2 for that exact reason, and the rook remains behind the pawn, and you can draw with your eyes closed, right? As soon as the king comes in contact with the pawn, you give a check. Otherwise, you can either move the rook up and down this way, or you can shuffle your king back and forth here. That's how you wait. As soon as the king touches the pawn, you give a check. And when the king goes away, it comes straight back behind the pawn again. Nothing black can do. This is a draw. So we go back to my game. You see that we have this exact configuration now, albeit there are a few extra pawns on the board, but they're kind of insignificant. This is with the pawn on f2. Can't you go to e2? Is this in this example, Matthew? So, hi, by the way. Thanks very much for tuning in. Shout out to Matthew. He has a great blog. Matthew K Canada on Lichess. Same as it's spelt in the chat. So in the example here, Matthew, I'm struggling to read this on my phone for whatever reason. Keeps trying to get me to report people. Let me see. With the pawn on f2, can't you go to e2? So with the pawn on f2, Please explain yourself, Matthew. I'm confused. The pawn's on b2. I can't see how it goes to f2. When the pawn's on f2, can't you go to e2? Yes, you can. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I see. I understand your question now. So yeah, after this check, if I came to e2, this tactic does not exist anymore because there is no skewer. So yeah, you're right. With the pawn on f2, it is possible to put my king on e2. Yeah, it is. And maybe this was actually better. Yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I should stick to the key squares because I know what I'm doing there. But maybe king e2 is possible. And maybe it has some advantage later on. Something weird. If my opponent does something weird, that I'm somehow closer to my passed d pawn here. Okay. So back to the game, which is not this. Let me promote this. That is absolutely not what happened. So let's find the game, which was check. I come up, they push. I did not play that move, right? So this is the point of the game. So we can delete the rest. But king e2, I can check. I'll leave that in as a suggestion. Does this make a difference? I don't think so. Feel free to engine check it yourself if you want to. Okay. So b2, huge sigh of relief. I feel like the game is now just a dead draw. And spoiler alert, it is, or it was. Again, not engine checked, but I do trust myself here. What did I play? What was my... I played... There's maybe a couple, maybe one other thing to say about this game. So after b2, I played the rook all the way back, right? Maximum distance, rooks are long range pieces. They started to bring their king over, and you know, my opponent said after the game they didn't know this, obviously, otherwise they wouldn't have done it. That was the one thing I was able to teach my opponent after the game. They brought their king over, and you know, you have to play these out. Even if you know as black, even if I'm in this position as black, and for some reason I've got my pawn on b2, I would never ever accept the draw here, because your opponent might not know what they're doing, right? There are plenty of ways for white to make a mistake here. For example, playing the move f3, right? So never, even if you know the theory and you know it's a draw, never assume that your opponent knows it's a draw. The fact that you know it's a draw is an advantage. It means you know all the little tricks in the position. You know why it's a draw, and if you know why it's a draw, you know all the reasons that your opponent can slip up and suddenly make it not a draw anymore. So I always advise my students to never accept a draw, even if you know it's a draw. And I have some great examples of from my own games of completely drawn end games that I knew was a draw. I knew, struggling now. I knew were drawn and my opponent lost them. But I was only able to win because I knew why it was a draw in the first place, if that makes sense. So they brought in the king. That was the last instructive bit. Let's just put the rest in so it's there. Let's see. That's king f6, rook b7. They played h5. It's fine. I played rook b8. They played king e6. I played rook b3. I decided not to shuffle the king here because their king can actually come to this square, this way. I calculated that it was totally fine, but you know, why allow it? Sorry, it's not totally fine. If their king gets to there when my king's on h2, then I'm going to lose my f2 pawn, and maybe then I do lose the game probably. Didn't want to even consider that as an option, so I left my king on g2. So I only waited with the rook. That was the last thing I wanted to say about this. That if you're going to wait, pick a waiting move. You know, sometimes it's better to leave the rook. Maybe sometimes it's better to leave the king. In this case, I figured the king was not necessarily much better on g2, but just better on g2. So just wait with the rook. Yeah, right, we're on the other side of this paper now. King d5. Rook b8. At this point, my opponent's looking at me like, do you know? I'm like, yeah, I know. I give a check here for fun. They put the king here. Which I advise. I do think, like, prolong it. You know, if you're on the side, only the side who can win, like, play with your opponent's emotions. Came back, and actually, this is the point at which my opponent accepted a draw. A little too early, I would say. Oh, no. The game did go on. They actually ended up putting their, like, I think I waited again, and I think they went... they did go here. I gave a check, and because at some point they tucked in behind here, and this was his last thing, saying, "Hey, do you know what to do?" Yeah, I do. Come back behind the pawn. Important. And we agreed to draw, like, at some point when he realized. I don't know if it was exactly here. I don't know. I guess I stopped notating, but yeah, we agreed to draw. So I got draw, half with Jan, who's not called Jan, to protect his anonymity. Let me just tab off of this and go to the scoreboard for the league, if anyone cares that isn't me now. So I had 8 out of 11 and was sitting in 28th place before this game in the league with a rating of 16-16. So this draw should net me some points, I guess. I'm still getting quite a lot of points for wins and losing quite a lot of points for losses because my rating's still not fully stabilized yet. But yeah, I'll be up to 8.5 out of 12, and I should get another really serious opponent next week, because all the people around me, I see one 1579 player who have already played, and above me there are no other players under 1600. So I'll definitely probably have a good opponent, and chances are most of the people above me are 1700. So again, I don't know where my rating's going to fall because I lost these 2 early games. I'm optimistic, or at least hopeful, that I can climb even higher. I've already exceeded what I thought was possible. I didn't think that I was a 1600, but we'll see where I end up. Anyway, that is the stream. Thanks very much for tuning in. I would do a second pass, but I don't have it in me today. But let me just quickly tell you what I will do. So this was me recording all the variations I calculated at the board and my thought process during that time. We can recap the takeaways. A lot of it was considering a move and dismissing it as, no, I don't want to allow my opponent to do that, without actually calculating where does it lead me to, and let's evaluate that position. I did that a few times, but there were a couple of times where I didn't do it. I don't think it was laziness. I think it was more fear. It was more saying, I don't like this. It looks bad. I can't tell you why, right? And I always say to my students, and I'll say it to myself this time, fear is not a variation, right? You can't not play a move because you're scared of it, and you can't play a move motivated by fear. You must calculate, right? Because the fear is not a variation, and normally the variation itself will eliminate any kind of emotional response you have to the move. Because as soon as you calculate, you can then say, oh, that's not scary. Oh, I don't get checkmated. Oh, I'm not losing material. Oh, my king isn't unsafe, right? And vice versa. You can say, whatever it is, you actually have the truth, or at least what you know is the truth, and you have to trust yourself. There's no point in calculating if you're not going to trust your own calculations, even though, of course, we all make mistakes when we're calculating. So that's my major takeaway here, is that I'm still doing this. I'm still dismissing moves based on emotions, not on variations. So that's something I really need to look out for. And there was a couple of moments there. One of them was my opponent's plan here, when I thought they're going to play f6 and e5. I don't like it. Where was my evaluation? Where did my calculation go? There was no calculation. Therefore, there can have been no evaluation or conclusion. So I will do that calculating and evaluating in my second pass in order to try and learn a bit more about the chess, right? This part is more about learning about me, which is, again, something I always say to my students. It's more important to learn about yourself than it is about chess when it comes to improvement. Obviously, you need both, but I think that like where the meat of the improvement comes from is in understanding your own thought process, not necessarily in understanding more about chess. Because a lot of the times when we make a mistake in chess, I don't think there were any glaring tactical errors here. At least I hope there weren't any that I missed that you caught. But let's say you blunder a fork. You don't need to go away and do 100 fork puzzles. You don't need to learn what a fork is. We all know what is the issue, right? It's not a chess problem, right? There'll have been a thought process error that led up to that fork occurring. That's where the improvement comes from, in my opinion. Obviously, there are things you need to, like an understanding of chess can help. For example, my opponent could definitely benefit from some extra chess knowledge here, right? Don't push the pawn all the way to the 2nd or the 7th rank. Then it's a draw, right? That's a knowledge error. They're rarer, in my experience as a coach, than the thought process errors. Most people know why the mistakes they made are mistakes almost instantly after they make them. The problem is, why did I make it? And actually, I have another whole blog post on that, which I've forgotten the name of. I think it's called It's Not Chess, It's You. Yeah, and that's the point, right? It's not a chess error, it's a you error. Anyway, I'm really rambling now, but I will wrap things up. Thank you so much. Thank you, Andrew, for saying that was a lovely job. And thanks so much. I know an hour and a half is a lot of you guys' time. I really appreciate you joining me for my first stream where I actually put leechess.org in the title, which supposedly notifies the people on Leechess that I'm doing this. I am taking on new students at the moment. If anyone wants to book a trial lesson, I can now do some plugs. I also have a blog article on Leechess. It actually really helps the algorithm if people like that. It's on the Leechess blogs community page right now. It's called Learning to Learn. That's my latest blog post. So if you want to like that, that's also great. Otherwise, yeah, really, thanks so much for being here. I will try and upload this as long as I don't fuck it up technically to YouTube, unedited, for your enjoyment. And I'll be back next Tuesday to play rapid games, which did not go well last Tuesday, so don't expect quality chess there. But at least it will be fun, and I do think I need to get more of that experience. Thanks so much, and I'll find the off button before I say bye. Goodbye.